Yeah, we could just
Yeah.
start where we are. I think that's all we're going to be able to do because, yeah, my nerves are just like noticeably different and more than interviewing somebody else, showing up to get interviewed. I'm like, whoa, what have I been asking people to do? So, yeah, it's
Well, I
pretty
don't
good
know.
medicine for me.
I think this is worth exploring at least a little bit
Oh, good. I love your
because here
excitement.
you are. You're in your comfortable spot. You're in the sauna, the Zoom sauna.
Right,
Hey,
right.
tell me again, where is this? Where are you physically?
It's at my brother's house
Okay.
in my brother's old bedroom.
Okay.
They have the good internet that I don't have at my house. And so if I want to Zoom, I have to come here because
Mhm.
this internet lets me connect on Zoom. The internet at my house is like barely enough for Netflix.
I got you. And so if you were in like if it were a metal room, it probably wouldn't even help that they have this awesome internet. So you've got this wood paneling here, which
Sure.
is super cool. I mean, it gives it a very, I don't know how to, it's like a cozy feel. I love it. But you're in your comfortable spot. You're on Zoom. You have conversations all the time.
Right.
Like this is what you do. This is all
Right?
just part of what you do,
Why is it
right?
different?
I don't
What's
know.
different? Right.
I
I've
want
been
to
asking
know.
myself that question since I canceled on you 2 weeks ago.
Oh, did you cancel on me 2 weeks ago because you were too nervous?
Yes. Yes. I wasn't ready yet. I was like, I can't do it. I'm so scared. Like I'm getting red. It's
Yeah.
hot. I mean,
Mhm.
it's like a full-on physical experience to like
Yeah.
go on stage. I mean, and that's,
True.
yeah, I mean, I'm on Zoom all the time. Like this is no different than
Yeah.
all the other times I've sat in this chair. And
Well, I
yet,
find it interesting because I'm a little bit more nervous too. And I think I know why. For me, it's, you know, when you were interviewing me, all I had to do was show up and just answer the questions. Like I just listen and go, yeah. So on this side of it, like I have to put at least a little bit more thought into the extraction process. Like, what do I, you know, be, in fact, you have to be comfortable and I have to be comfortable probably in order for it to really work the very best it can, right? So that
totally.
made me a little bit nervous. And then here's what kind of settled me down a little bit. I was like, it's not live. Like at the very least, if I completely screw this up, and if Carly says the worst thing that could happen is that you could say, well, I don't feel like that went very well. And so I'm going to ask somebody else to interview me. And you know what, Carly, if you do that, I will not be mad at all. I will understand completely. But that's the worst case here. And in fact, for you, like you are making the recording. I don't even have that.
Yeah.
Like you could run with it. I mean, I don't think you would, but like you could run with something I wasn't comfortable with. You can't. Your worst case here is that you just say, this hour that I spent with Will, I'm just going to burn it.
Yeah, that was just for fun. You
No,
know,
it's practice. It's
dude.
practice round. And in
And
fact,
so
we could just do it again next week.
exactly. That okay, so that's what's really interesting about 2 weeks ago. I just had to delay it. I was like, I just can't. And then this morning, that was the same power that came to me was like, you are making this. Like, if you don't like
Yeah,
it, then throw that pancake in the trash and make another one. Like,
exactly.
dude, you got veto power. It's fine. And so that was also what let me show up today. And like, we don't need to keep kicking this can down the road. Let's just try it and see what
Oh,
happens.
this is
Yeah.
wild.
Panic.
I'm surprised, but then again, I'm also not because like life is just funny that way. And you know what? When I look at across the body of work that you've created, one of the I guess themes is like how did all of these folks get to that place that they were always meant to be, right? And and I guess that's what we want to know from you. Like, how did you get to this place where you are now, which is probably where you were meant to be, and being the person who extracts it from other people and does it brilliantly and beautifully, and I commend you for it. But I think people are going to be interested. This can make you nervous, or it can make you encouraged to go on and do the thing that must be done. People want to know where that comes from. Like, where does that skill and where does that desire come from that you have? And so maybe we'll figure out how to get there today. And I mean, I think it seems like one of your kind of original, one of your primary questions is always to start off just by, telling us about the beginning. Where
Yeah.
did you grow up and what was that like?
Yeah. Let's just do it. See what
Let's
happens.
do it.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Why not? So I was born in Topeka, Kansas in
Okay.
1988, and the first of my parents' four children. So I'm the oldest. I have three
Okay.
younger brothers who came along very quickly after I did. And
Okay.
I say that because so by the time I go to preschool, I'm leaving at home my 3-year-old brother, my 1-year-old brother, and my 1 month old brother. And I'm going to preschool. And my mom is at home with all the brothers, the little herd of them. And yeah, that was like a big piece of my growing up was being the oldest of these four kids. Um,
What
yeah,
was that like at preschool? Like, was it kind of like a relief to get out of the house and away from all those brothers, though I'm sure you love them now? Or was it
it
like,
was so
I don't want
calm.
to, I want to be, I want to stay in this place with my family?
It was a lot more like peaceful at school, and there was a lot more attention at school. There was a teacher whose full-time focus was showing you cool things, like just wanting you to see, like, look at this fun story, look at how this thing works, look at this. And like, you just got to learn and learn and learn and learn and learn. And I loved school. I loved school. It was like I mean, I'm 4 years old going to preschool and just thinking, like, wow, like, why didn't I do this sooner? Like, why did it take me 4 years to show up at school? Like, why can't we go sooner? Like, every year, the first day of school, that was like my favorite day every single year. Better than Christmas, the night before the first day of school. That was like, yeah,
Wow.
the shit.
And so, I mean, the three brothers, you're in the home of one of them right now doing this interview. So,
All three
like,
of them,
there must
actually.
be, are you all still close or like, how does
Yeah,
that work now?
physically, especially,
Mhm.
we all live in the same zip code. So that
Okay.
counts for something. And I see them a lot more now than I did. I lived in Texas for like 6 years. And so I didn't see them very much during that phase. But um, yeah, no, we get along. My family and I also get along. I will say, like, I feel like an artist of sorts, like a creative. I like to experiment. I like to try different stuff. I like to learn different stuff. I dabble in lots of different things. And I come from an extremely hardworking family. Like that is what is most valuable and cherished is like your work ethic. And so yeah, like in general, I feel like my family is extremely hardworking, extremely entrepreneurial, very talented people. And I am too, but in a little bit slightly different way that
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it just like kind of doesn't mix exactly. Like it doesn't just dissolve one into the other and like make for a super harmonious mixture when you put me inside this group of people.
I
The
mean, one could be an extremely hardworking and
artists
entrepreneurial artist,
that
right?
I got the training I got and I'm making the best of it, you know? And right, I got a killer work ethic. And
Yeah.
I say killer because like I also would call myself like a recovering workaholic
Oh, sure.
where
Yeah.
like you can take that just way too far. As far as like if you want to put a good work ethic up on a pedestal and then chase after it, I mean, I feel like I ran myself off a cliff
Yeah.
multiple times, like trying to live up to my own impossible standards kind of thing.
I can so relate to that. And I bet many of your viewers and listeners can relate to that too.
Mm.
It's a weird thing that has sort of changed over the course of my lifetime where, yeah, in the 1970s, 80s, 90s, like it was almost sort of universally worshiped that notion of a work ethic. And I think now, some of the younger generations probably do a better job with kind of the balance of that all. And sure, it's good to accomplish things, but it's also good to, have some balance in one's life. I don't know.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
hope. So I'm
Well,
curious. Tell me more about your parents. Like, where does this come from? Is it parents? Is it grandparents? Is it like extended family, aunts, uncles? What did they do,
kind of
and how did this all
yeah,
land on you like
all
that?
of them. Actually, when I was growing up, and still now, my mom's side of the family is pretty close as far as my mom's siblings and my mom's parents and all of us cousins. And I was the only girl cousin out of 10 boy cousins on my mom's
Wow.
side of the family. And I'm like right in the middle of this big group of boys. And again, it's like sports and hard work. Like that's what's going on
Mm,
in the family. But yeah,
yeah.
my mom's parents, they had their own business from gosh, like in the 50s probably, like back
Okay.
when my parent or my mom and her siblings were born, and they did trucking and welding and built pipe fences and those kinds of things and ran it for gosh, like 50 years or 60 until my grandpa
Wow.
died. I mean, it was like he never retired. He just passed away and the business closed a couple years after that. And then my mom met my dad a few months after he started his own business. And so since 1982, they have been running their business together. So that's what, like 41 years of being in the same business. I mean, doing slightly different operations, moving ahead with technology mostly, but selling and servicing milking equipment is what my dad started doing, like I said, a few months before he met my mom. He had been basically doing that, working for somebody else. And a lot like a lot of the stories we hear on My Grocery Adventure, like, why did you leave? Why did you do something different? I didn't like who I was working with. I thought,
Yeah.
you know what? I can do this all by myself. And so he goes off on his own. And then he meets my mom and they, date for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years before they get married and start having kids. So running their own business together as husband wife, like I saw my parents doing it and I grew up right next door to my grandparents and I saw them doing it. So
Wow.
I mean, it just to be an entrepreneur, to like build your own business that is yours, that you run it however you want, that was like my model of what it meant to do a good job in the world. And like, basically the question just always was like, what is the business? Not, am I going to be an entrepreneur? Am I not going to be an entrepreneur? It's like, what am I going to do? How am I
Mm.
going to create? What am I going to create?
Well, that's another interesting thing. I think, again, 40 years ago, that notion of work ethic was important, primary, and that notion of entrepreneur valued to some degree, but less. Those have clearly flipped in the last 40 years. Now, I think we listen to somebody talk about their entrepreneurial vision or the execution of that, and we're like, we value that really highly. The
Yeah.
notion of them working 85 hours a week, never sleeping, ignoring their family, like we're like, okay, whatever, we can live without
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So very interesting. And boy, talk about businesses that are kind of magnets for people who work really hard: trucking, welding, fencing, selling and servicing milking equipment. I mean, I'm trying to think. I couldn't think of too many businesses where I suspect the marketplace has changed more over the last 40 years, right? I mean, like anything that has to do with like ag, but milk, like dairy farms, especially, like I'm far from an expert, but wow, I think there's been massive changes in the last 40 years. So, how do you keep a business going through that level of change? I have no idea. I'm impressed by
Yeah.
the notion, though.
Yeah. Both of them, both of my parents, I feel like they're very impressive people. There's a lot of learning. There's a lot of like continuing to educate yourself. Like I think about in my dad's office, in his corner of it, he's got like all of his like completion plaques from all of the courses that he sent himself to like learn this new equipment or learn this new system or learn this new like 40 years worth. So there's quite a few of them up there. And now it's kind of extending over this way where my three brothers, they all work in that business, like with my parents. All three of them
What?
moved in there. And so Ross is the robot guy. he's the one that's like leading the charge on this next wave of technology that is like taking the labor out of milking with these automated robot milkers. I'll see if I can find a video and like link it in the description where it's like a chute that the cow walks into, and the robot is going to scan like the ID bracelet on the cow. And so we know like when did we last milk this cow? And if it's
Mhm.
been long enough ago, then we give the cow a little treat to eat out here in front, and the sensor starts finding the udder and puts on the milking apparatus, and then the cow gets milked, and when it's done, the chute opens and the cow walks out. And now if the cow's like, hey, I want another treat, let me walk around and like get back in there, the first thing is scan the ID bracelet, and it's like, I just milked you, it's got to be at
Sorry.
least 6 more hours before we're going to try again, and it just like kicks them back out. So that is what they're doing right now in milking, is like they just put them in a pen with one of those robots and let them milk themselves.
I have to say, it kind of ruins the old joke, Carly. Perhaps you've heard it.
What
The
is it?
salesman who walks to the farm and knocks on the farmer's door and he says, hey, I've got this device to sell you. And the farmer says, okay, tell me about it. And he says, it'll do half of the work for you. And the farmer says, great, I'll take two of them, please.
Yeah.
And obviously
Yeah.
the joke is that like there's no getting around it. Like there's labor on the farm, man. Like you got to work, you got to work, you got to work. As
Yeah.
much as people would like to save it from you, you can't. This technology is rendering the joke obsolete.
Yeah. Well, there's so much labor needed in a dairy farm. And
Oh
as soon as you start losing that, or, like you don't have anybody who wants to buy it, or like the parents are, aging out of it and nobody wants to take it over. And what are they taking over? They're taking over an operation that runs like 20 hours a day, 365 days a year for the rest of your life.
yeah,
So, I mean, that's what you're inheriting. Do you want
yeah,
it? And our generation is saying, no, I don't want it. And so the farms that are adopting these robots are the farms where the parents are basically being told by the next generation, like, you will build this infrastructure and we will take it over.
yeah.
Like, we're not going to take it in its current form, but if you
Mhm.
will work with us to go ahead and make the investment so that all of this is established, then yeah, we can run this, we can do that. And so there are multiple farms that are making the investment in the technology, and that's what their business isn't all the way to robots by any means. They still service
Mhm.
a lot of parlors and lots of various different sizes of operations. But yeah, that's definitely where it's headed, is like, you deserve a quality of life. Just because you milk cows doesn't mean you should be a slave. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be
That
like that
is
anyway.
absolutely fascinating. I mean, well, thank you. I learned something interesting today. And gosh,
Cool. Got
I
that
have
done.
all kinds of opportunities to work with all kinds of businesses. I had no idea about that. That's really interesting.
Well, there you go. Yeah, I'll put a link so you can see the robot in action. And then
Okay. Yeah.
basically, like, that's the milking piece. And they have robots that are feeders that like
Mhm.
scooch the feed where it's supposed to be so they can reach it. There's robots that are doing this. There's robots doing this. Like, you got to buy them all individually, but if they're all doing their thing and working, you're eliminating jobs with every single bit of it, which
Yeah.
is an ethical, like, you're eliminating jobs. But like, in this case, I think you're
Yeah.
you're setting some people free who were
I think that's not
previously
much of an ethical
enslaved.
gray area. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say.
Turning the
Wow,
video
interesting.
back
We
on.
just got a picture of you on the screen.
I know it kicked my video off for a second, but I'm gonna see if I can turn it back on.
It did that to me earlier, remember?
I know.
Hmm.
Let me try
Well,
unplugging it and plugging it back in.
while you're getting your video back up, I guess I'm curious. You say you were born in Topeka, and the business seems more, I guess, rural than that. But like, is that where you were raised? Like, did you grow up in Topeka? Did you go to high school in Topeka? Ah, you're back.
There we go. Can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah. Okay,
Yes.
cool. So I was born in Topeka, but my parents already lived in Whorton at the time, Whorton, Kansas. So that's like 30 minutes north of Topeka. The town itself is maybe 3,200 people, Jackson County, where it's at, is maybe 12,000 people. Um, and when I was born, my parents lived south of town. And when I was two, they built a house north of town, and that's where they still live. So I lived like in the same house for from the time I was two to the time I was 18, and I left for college. So, yeah.
And south of town, north of town, meaning Whorton. So you were born like in a hospital in Topeka, but really yeah, okay, I got it.
Yeah, my parents and their first kid, they wanted like a bigger hospital just in case like something went wrong or
Sure.
anything. And with all three of my brothers, they were born in Whorton at the Whorton
Yeah.
Hospital,
By the
which
time you're on number four, it's like, well, yeah,
we
okay,
got this. Yeah,
yeah,
it's no big
we can
deal.
do this. Okay. So what? I don't know. What was Whorton like?
Um, well, okay, so let me go back to like school in general
Okay.
because I didn't know about Whorton, right? I only knew about school.
Okay.
Because like I didn't live in town. My parents didn't really put us in a whole lot of activities when we were that little. So like we're at home north of town, next door to my grandparents. So like
Wait,
that
how far north of town are we talking here?
couple
Like,
miles, not
okay.
not super far, but far
So
enough
you
where
had to
like
get to the grocery store or the gas station. You just
you
go.
can't walk anywhere when you're a little
Oh,
kid. Like there's no kids next door. There's no
gotcha.
like daycare kids that you're going to go and interact with and socialize with. So, like, my first socializing outside of my family was when I went to school. And so that was my beginning of learning about Whorton, was interacting with the other kids that live there. And so it
Uh,
was a wild ride, but not necessarily because of Whorton, but because like I didn't know for a couple years it took me to figure out that there's two different parts of school. There's the learning part and there's the social part. And the social part is an animal that I just like I literally looked around one time in second grade and was like, was I just gone the day that they taught us how to make friends?
oh,
Did I just like was I sick and nobody gave me the assignments? Like they paired everybody up and they put us in our little social groups and like I was just gone that day? Like nobody filled me in and like they just never taught us how to make friends and like I'm looking around at everybody who just knows how to do that and like why do you guys all know how to do that? And a huge part of it I found out as the years went on and I studied the social side of school and I tried to crack into it, very little success. But a lot of it was because they were in groups together. They were like they all went to the same church or
oh,
they all played on the same baseball team or like
yep,
whatever it was. They all lived in this same housing development. Like that's
right.
where their friends came from, was not at school. It was in all of this stuff that happened outside of school. And like I was just at home with my family outside of school. That was my social. And so that dynamic, I go into it because like it sets up the path for my whole life as far as where I was, I would say like at age 7. This was probably one of my earliest, most formative experiences of my whole life at 7 years old was joining 4-H. Oh, dang it. Keeps kicking my camera off.
Yeah, that's weird. But you're right in this really fascinating
I
formative
know.
moment of
I
joining
know.
4-H, and you got
I'm
to
ready to
tell
go for it too.
us about. Oh my goodness!
Try.
Here, well, while you're getting the camera turned back on, there's a little opposite of this that kind of strikes me. I had this is 10, 15 years ago, but I had a student from China that worked with me. He was like a student employee in the SBDC office, and I don't know that I'd ever really had much time to just sit and discuss things with a person from China. And so he grew up in the one child era, right? And so it's the exact opposite of you. Like he gets here, and I'm like, so, tell me about your aunts and uncles and cousins, your family back home. And he's like, no, man, one child. And that goes back a bunch of generations. It means neither of my parents have a brother nor a sister. It means I don't have an aunt or an uncle. It means I don't have cousins. You know, you trace that back even 2 generations, and all that stuff goes away. You just don't have them. So it's really the opposite of your experience. And I think your audio might be out. I'm not sure.
Is
Oh,
it
there you are.
okay?
No, I got you.
Yeah.
So 4-H, 4-H.
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
Okay. So 4-H, which is a whole reason like why I joined is a whole nother story. But I get into 4-H, and one of the requirements of 4-H is that you pick a project. You have to have at least one. And so you can do sewing, or you can have a bucket calf, or like whatever you want to do. There's lots of options. And so I get into sewing, and the other component that's required in 4-H is I think it's every year, maybe twice a year, you have to give a project talk. You have to stand at the front of the room and talk about whatever your project is and the process and what you're doing, what you learned, and all the things. And so the first time I did this is like my first public speech is at 7 years old in front of the 50 people in my 4-H
Uh,
group. And at school, and in a very busy household, which was not like anybody's fault, but there was just a lot going on at home. And then at school, there's no friends. So, like, I had this feeling of like wondering on a regular basis, am I invisible? Like, do I exist? Am I real? Do I think I'm real, but nobody else can see me? Like, it was
that is fascinating.
it was just bizarre, like
Yeah.
how you can be around a bunch of other people and like you still don't know if you're real or not.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Okay, so then you walk in front of 50 people who all at the same time listen with undivided attention and then respond with a round of applause. I can't even describe to you the feeling when I went and sat back down in my chair. I was a different person. Like
In what way? Like, I assume that was a great feeling, but I suppose it could be an overwhelming, scary, not great feeling too. I
all
don't
of the above, yeah, for sure. And like the feeling was I'm real. They all just
Wow.
looked at me. They all
Yeah.
just acknowledged my existence all at the same time. Like I know for sure now that I'm real. Like it was a
Mm.
confirmation of like I'm truly not invisible. Sometimes it may feel like I am, but I'm actually not. There are ways of stepping out and being seen. And yeah.
I'm curious, was that after that formative event, did people that otherwise maybe wouldn't have talked to you then start talking to you because they had at least, questions about that, or were impressed by your presentation and decided that you were worth kind of pursuing a conversation with, or what?
Yeah. I don't remember that.
Hmm.
I
So
don't
this was all just an internal
yeah,
thing. There was no external about it. It was
not that I
just
remember, other
that.
than they clapped when I was done. Like they
That's
all
great.
seemed to know that I was done now. And I'm like, well, they must have been paying attention. And so yeah, it was just like this internal confirmation that like I talked and somebody listened. And it gave me the seed, like the seed was planted like that evening that I am going to be a professional public speaker.
I'm gonna be in showbiz.
Yeah, when
I'm
can I
going to
get
Broadway.
back in front of, oh, no, nothing like that, but like a professional public speaker? I'm going to give speeches and people are going to watch. And that's what I'm going to do. When can I do the next one? And this set up this arc of when can I do the next one? So, like, I kept doing the project talks and I entered my first public speaking contest in 5th grade, where that's where like I wanted to write a speech and give it, and I wanted judges to tell me like, did I do the best or were there
Sure.
people who did better than me? And I mean that began like a long career of like winning public speaking contests.
So did you do like forensics in high school, like debate and extemporaneous speaking and all that kind of thing?
I did forensics for like a hot second, and then I did not do it anymore, but there was FFA in
Oh,
high
okay.
school that had prepared public speaking. It also had extemp, which I did not do. um, and it had part law where like you could practice debate and making arguments and motions and all of that.
Wow, I'll be darned. I didn't know that FFA had all that.
Yeah.
Then
And a
that's
bunch more
another
stuff, but
important
I
information.
focused on the ones where I would get to make speeches.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I really
And
wanted
so, and where did you go to high school then?
in Whorton. So
Whorton.
I did preschool through 12th grade, all in Whorton, through like several different buildings. There was about, I think we had one of the bigger classes, and there was like 110 kids in my class. And maybe the normal classes were more like 80.
Yeah, that seems big for a town of not much more than 3,000 people.
Totally. And it's probably like, not the whole county because there are two other
Sure,
schools in the county. But there are people who live, 10 miles away from Whorton, that kind of thing, that are like coming into Whorton. So it's not exactly just
sure.
in town. But yeah, and we were one of the bigger classes, which was actually really awesome. They had to hire a special teacher to come in, like an extra teacher, I guess I should say, so that they had enough for our kindergarten and first grade class. And her name was Mrs. Wilderman, and I loved her so much. She was the one I was talking about, where like there's this person whose job it is to like show you cool stuff. Like that's all she wants to do is like teach you things all day. Like it's just
Wow.
the best thing ever. School's awesome. Yeah, that was because of her. She
That'd
was
be a fun job too, I guess, if you
oh,
stop and think about it.
she had the perfect personality for it. She was very playful and yeah, had the right spirit to work with 25-year-olds. So not everybody
Yeah.
does. It's a saint right there. Yeah.
So then what happened? What did you decide to do after being one of 110 graduates in your class? What was next?
So when I was coming to the end of high school, I was really ready to just kind of be done with school and try my hand at working for a while. And
But you love school.
I
I
know,
like
isn't that weird? And I think a lot of it was like I didn't know. Like I had no idea. I had no good plan on
I bet you
what to
did
do.
pretty well at school, didn't you? Like you made a lot of A's.
Yes, gosh dang it.
And
Hang
so
on.
then did you feel a lot of pressure then, like to continue making lots of A's? Like was it, I wonder if that's something that could sort of turn you away from being interested in more school. Like if it was something that, that you felt pressure to perform.
Yeah, I think that could have definitely been a lot of it. And actually, there was kind of a disappointing experience at the end of high school that was one of the best things that could have happened to me, I think, which was I took my grades very seriously, which is a whole story all by itself, but like to an anxiety provoking degree. I took my
Ah,
grades very seriously. And the only B plus I ever got was an 89.6. And I went to the teacher and I said, will you please round this to a 90? Like, will you please give me an A? And he's like, why would I give it to you if you didn't earn it? And so that happened sophomore year. So I
wow.
knew going through the whole high school thing, like I'm not a 4.0. Like that's not even possible to get a 4.0 in high school. And the top 10%, they they all had 4.0s. And
Mm,
the top 10%, there were 109 individuals in our class. And so what is 10% of
it'd be 11.
109?
Yeah, 11 people.
They decided that that is not true because the 11th person is really only 90% of a person.
And that was you?
And that was me.
Oh,
Everybody
man.
else had, if I had had a 4.0, it would
Yeah.
have been an 11-way tie. And there would have been no way to distinguish who was actually in 11th place. But because I
What
had
was the
that
class?
algebra too,
Really?
yeah. And I loved
And you
math.
got
It was my favorite subject. So that's, yeah.
89.6.
Why would I
Man,
give it to you if you didn't earn it?
the margins there are just ridiculously thin. So, like, I, I have to assume that this just felt soul crushing at the time and like you'd never overcome it.
It felt like a huge injustice. Like it was
Yeah.
so unfair. Like I had tried so hard and it had been for nothing. And so when I went to college, which I did go to college, I had a completely different philosophy on grades. I'm like, nobody gives a shit what your grades are. Okay. Like, nobody cares if you get a B or an A. Like, did you graduate from college? Like maybe in the final sort, your GPA matters a teeny bit, but it's not
Well,
worth the effort. It's not worth the anxiety that I put
I,
myself through.
I got to tell you, I'm glad to hear you say that, and I feel much less judged because, if I ever got an 89.6 in a class, that might have been my best grade.
Oh,
No, I mean, I made the occasional A's here and there, but I made plenty of non A's
oh,
for sure. So,
yeah,
yeah, I can only imagine that. Yeah, that would be, gosh, really
yeah.
kind of debilitating in a way. So,
Well, and that's why I say like it was definitely disappointing and it pissed me off at the time for sure.
good.
But it also broke me of trying so hard on such like external arbitrary metric systems. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
I put in so much effort, and was the reward even worth it in the first place? If I had gotten it, I probably would have continued saying yes.
Yeah.
And because I didn't, and I had to look on the outside, and I was like, what's different between me and them? I, I no longer see it as valuable. It was very disillusioning. So for that, I'm very grateful.
So, and I'm thinking you would have, if you were in 10th grade when that happened, did you say?
Mm-hmm.
Then you'd have had a brother that was in like 8th grade, another one that was like
Ninth,
in
seventh,
6th
and
grade,
sixth.
ninth,
Yeah.
7th, and yeah, and then another one even that was younger than that. Like,
Mhm.
I'm curious if they took anything from it, and like, did they kind of follow in your footsteps academically, or were they not quite
Not
as committed?
really. I mean, they're all very smart, very
Mm,
intelligent people, but none of them had the life or death seriousness about it that I seem to have for whatever reason. Um, and they made okay grades, but they also played a lot more sports than I
uh,
did, and that was more their thing that they really excelled at was in sports, and I fall down just standing still, so I was not ever really in sports. And so yeah, like my support card, it was like, this is where I show up. This is where I show what I'm good at, which was learning and knowing stuff. And so yeah, to have my favorite subject of all the subjects be the one that gets me the B, like it was a good moment for like really reworking some of my ego attachments to like, where does my worth come from? Is it because I get
yeah,
all A's? I had to let that go because I didn't have all A's anymore. So I had
yeah.
to get over that, which was probably really good, you know?
I mean, I'm a little bit probably biased, but I definitely agree with you. And in fact, I have a 6th grader now who I think is following. Like, it's just this year that they start getting kind of letter grades, and I feel like my 6th grader is kind of shying away from some other activities and really focused on the academics, which is cool, but it's a little worrisome, that, that they're going to have that a similar type of experience. I don't know.
Yeah. Which, I mean, just looking at later in life, like I I have a passion for accuracy. I have like
Mm,
a commitment to quality that it worked so well with grades and grading and test taking and all of that. Um, Out in the real world, though, that's where I say like I've like run myself off the cliff multiple times
mm,
with like, it can't actually be perfect, and yet I'll work it to try to make it perfect. So it's more like a personality trait overall in terms of like, yes, it played out in school like that.
mm,
Um, but over time, like through experiences like that one where I was kind of robbed of my perfection or my illusion of perfection,
mm,
I have slowly grown out of like trying to make it perfect or like pushing myself to make it perfect, but it emphasis on the slowly part because that was pretty good. I really like it.
And the thing that kind of drives me crazy thinking about it on your behalf is that it's all just a rounding error. I mean, 89.6 rounds to 90, and then 11, 11 people rounds to 10% of 109. Like, come on.
Yeah.
That's just insane. But
And like,
no, I
isn't
get
that such a good metaphor though for the world?
mm,
Like the world's not fair. The world's
yeah,
not set up to like be fair to you. That's not what is
really
going on
not.
here. Like,
Yeah.
and so I'm glad I learned that on like such small arbitrary things like grades and top 10% in my high school class. Like, yeah, would it have been cool? Probably, but it
Mhm.
didn't happen. And I got a different experience out of it. And I got to think like losing it is probably even more valuable than getting it. Like when you play it out over the long term.
Wow. I'm going to write that down. Losing it is more valuable than getting it.
Sometimes, right?
Yeah,
Doesn't
that's
that make
brilliant.
sense?
Yeah, I love it. I love it. That is fantastic. So I think what part of one of the things that led us down that path was that we were talking about what you did after high school, and I think you said you gave some thought to not going to college or taking a gap year. Or I don't know what
Yeah.
did you do and
Yeah.
why?
So, okay. College wasn't so much like on my radar, but about halfway through my senior year, my FFA advisor, Jason Larison, started talking to me about his suggestion that I run for state office for Kansas FFA. So for Kansas
Oh,
FFA, yeah, state office for the government. No. Gosh, dang it. This turd is just, weak.
yeah, it's all good.
It is.
So FFA advisor, that's really interesting.
Yeah, so he had been a really good mentor to me through high school. Like just I could probably do a whole episode about how that guy
Yeah.
built up my self-esteem and my confidence and all of that.
Wow.
He was the one that like as I was doing public speaking in FFA, he would be the one where like I'm writing my speech and turning it into him so he can help me
Mhm.
like critique it. I practice giving my speech and he gives me feedback on like, don't move around so much, like stop touching
Oh, sure.
like those kinds of things. And so he had been doing that with me through all 4 years of high school. And halfway through my senior year, I hadn't ever even applied to be a chapter officer, a district officer. I like never went out for any of those kinds of leadership things. I just like didn't even try for it. And so then he's like, "Yeah, you should run for state office." And I'm like, why would I do that? Like, I was never a chapter officer. I was never a district officer. Like, what are you even thinking? And he's like, well, I'm thinking that you get interview practice. You get to sit there while they ask you 100 behavioral based interview questions, which answering all of those are just 100 little speeches that you get to
Mhm.
give.
Yep.
And that if you get slated, if you're like top 10 in the candidates, then you get to go on stage at McCain Auditorium and give a speech in front of like 1,500 people. And I was like,
Whoa.
okay, where do I sign? Like he put it in the language. He dangled the exact carrot
Yeah.
that was going to get me to bite onto that hook. And so I ran for state office because I really wanted to give my speech on stage at McCain Auditorium.
Like the exact opposite of what most high school students would be thinking. Like, I got to give a speech? No
But
way.
that's why you wouldn't do it. That's why I did it. And I think I was probably the most surprised when I actually got elected. So
Wow.
at that point, you, as a state officer, you have to attend like a post high school institution, like either go to K State or go to a community college or something. You have to go somewhere. And so I applied to K State because I was running for state office, and you have to be able to show that you're going to go somewhere. And I'm like, I'm not going to get elected, so I'm not going to go. Like, it's just not even, it's the world's smallest deal. Like, here, $35, let
Right.
me apply.
Oh,
And
wow.
so then I got elected to state office. And then it's like, well, K-State is the only school that I applied to because that was just so I could put something on the application. And so in August of 2006, I moved to Manhattan, Kansas, and I started K-State. And that's where I got my degree.
The capriciousness of life, right? I mean, just the decisions that are sort of almost made on your behalf by the smallest of things. That's just incredible.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe most importantly, you weren't invisible, Carly. You were not invisible.
I was not. It, again, like it blew my mind to, I mean, there were 22 of us candidates, and some of them, like when you're in Kansas, you have to be either a freshman in college or a sophomore in college to run for state office. And so some of them were coming out of high school like me, and some of them had already been at college for a year. And some of those ones had run for state office the year before. So they had like already gone through the process. They had already been at school for a year. Like they just carried themselves differently, I felt like, than us high school kids. And so like going into the group, I mean, as I met them, as I like got to know them, and we spent a lot of time together over the 3 days of getting asked all the questions, it was like I just knew that I'm not even going to get to give my speech. Like if some miracle happened and I did squeak my way into the bottom of the top 10, like, and I got to give my speech, that would be radical. That would be amazing. But like I had made peace with like, there's no freaking way I'm getting above all of these people. Like, look at how awesome they are.
Yeah, that 89.6 will definitely set you up to
Like,
accept your fate for sure.
right.
So,
That like they're all better than me. And obviously I'm not gonna win. And so then the day comes where it's like the last day of convention and they're ready to announce like who's the top 10 candidates, the slate. We're going to vote on these top 10. The top six become the new state officer team. And so we're all gathered backstage. It's dark. It's like silent out there. And they're like, all right. And so you're two candidates for the first position, the very first position they're naming off. And mine is the first name they read. They're like,
okay.
your candidates for 2006, 2007 state FFA Sentinel are Carly Whorton and the other person. And so at that point, our job was to step forward so that the current state Sentinel could grab a hold of both of us.
Mm-hmm. When was that picture taken? Just curious.
A few years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, a few years ago, back in the long hair days.
Yeah.
Um,
Crazy long hair days.
dude, I had some of those. Um, so yeah, we had to step forward so he could grab us both and run us out onto the stage and sit us in the chairs. And so at the end of announcing the slate, there's 10 of us sitting on stage. And that's the moment where they're going to hand you the microphone and you got to get up there and give your speech.
Okay.
And so our position was going to be first to give our speech. So we had the least amount of time. They were just going to finish announcing the rest of the slate. And then one of us was going to have to stand up and talk. And she was first. And I could tell like from the time we got seated in the chairs, like she can't believe we're here. She's like having a moment of shock where she cannot believe that she's sitting in this chair right now. And I thought I had made with like, I'm not going to get on the slate. Like, I'm not going to get to do it. And yet I could believe I'm sitting in this chair. Like, I'm not so shocked I can't still remember my speech and like still get through it. She was like crying, like during her speech. She like couldn't breathe and she was very emotional during her
Yeah.
speech. And I remember the end of her turn and the beginning of my turn and like getting a hold of the microphone.
Yeah.
This is really testing patience. That's okay. It's all good.
Yeah.
I can remember like in a tunnel, like one of those moments where like everything else in the world stops existing. And I was just holding the microphone and there was just the spotlight. And I just did my speech like I was born for that moment. and they count the votes and they announce later that day that I'm the winner of that election, that I won my little contest. And they told me, the lady who runs the election told me the next year when I was serving behind the scenes as like part of the nominating committee, like doing the interviews of the new officers, or the new officer candidates. She told me during that process, she's like, we counted your votes 3 times because we could not believe that someone with no leadership history came out of nowhere and got like 93% of the votes. Like, she's like, we counted them 3 times because we couldn't believe that that's what happened, but that's what
Wow.
happened. All
Dang.
because of those 2 minutes where
Yeah.
I had composure and she
Yeah.
did not. And that was the only difference. She was a fantastic person. She had
Yeah.
the way better resume. She had been chapter officer for years, district officer for years. Like, she had all these things that she had done, and she lacked composure during her 2 minutes, and I had mine. And
Yeah.
our lives went two completely different directions.
Well, it's interesting that the voters put so much weight on that 2 minutes too, you know? Like, I don't know. I mean, we've just had this whole like college football playoff nightmare for some people where, you know, the team that went undefeated, like that whole body of work wasn't recognized here in the selection process. And a team that lost a game was selected. Like you could imagine in this process, the voters aren't probably given perfect clarity.
Yeah.
Do we, you know, give full weight to this 2 minutes and man, Carly's speech was really good, or are we supposed to consider the entire body of work? I don't know. It's interesting to
Yeah.
think about.
And I don't remember like what kind of a, because they had delegate packets that like had stats sheets in there
Mhm.
as far as like some information about us, but I don't remember at all like what kind of information. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't feel like I earned that. I don't feel like I did better than her, and that's why like I have this opportunity. Like, for those 2 minutes, I showed
Yeah,
up with a little bit more emotional composure, and
yeah,
it changed my life and hers. Like, it just blows your mind what it can come down to sometimes, as far as like I was not going to college and then I got elected. And so then, I went to college.
yeah. That is amazing. I mean, you've identified a couple of pretty important moments, kind of events in your life where, like, the whimsical capriciousness of life, like you've really kind of brought that to the forefront for us today in a couple of ways.
I
So
feel like my
I think
whole
that's
life is like that, which is why I love this podcast and
yeah,
finding out that other people have moments like that too, where
yeah.
we're really not as in control as we like to think we are. It's like life comes along and it's like, no, 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 here, here.
Yes,
Put
we
your,
make plans. The Buddha smiles.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
So we're getting close to an
Yeah,
hour, I think, if you can
totally.
imagine that. So I don't know. I want to hear more about then. Okay, FFA, and you probably wouldn't have gone to college, and now you do. So what you know what what then becomes of your life because of college? Like how much did that change things for you?
Yeah.
I don't know. Should we get into that, or should we wait till next time?
I'll give you one teeny story about college.
Oh yes, give us a hook,
A little, yeah,
and
like
then we'll
a,
make everybody wait.
so
Yeah, see, that's why this is your podcast. You're in charge. You
let me
still get
lay
to
this
make
out.
the decisions here.
Okay, this is so great. And this is again one of those moments where life is so much easier than we think it is. So in the midst of the running for state office process, we spent, I mean, like 12 or 14 hours a day in these holding rooms with each other while we waited our turn to go and do our interview. And
Holding rooms. Were you like in handcuffs
no, but this small room
or
and there's
close?
22 of us and
Oh,
only
okay.
one person leaves at a time. So yeah, we're in close quarters. And they would bring in other people, like typically past state officers would like come in and visit. They would like come in and sit for an hour and like hang out, and people would ask questions and the person would tell stories or whatever. And I never did work up the courage to talk to any of them, but I listened to every single thing every single one of them said. And one of them just blew my mind. Her name was Sarah, and she captivated me as far as like the way she talked. She sounded exactly like I wanted to sound. She was so knowledgeable, she was so poised, she laughed, she was graceful. She just was, oh, I the pedestal just built itself right up under her. It was
Yeah.
cool. And at the end, right before she left, somebody asked her, "Hey, I meant to ask you, what is your major?" And she said, "Oh, ag econ." And I took that and I said, "Okay, that's my major, ag econ." And
Wow.
that was what I graduated in. And that's why I picked it, was because that's what she
That's
was doing. And so
amazing.
that was as easy as it was. I mean, I'm not even going to go there, but if I do go there, ag econ, oh, that would be cool. Yeah. So when I got elected, I knew what I was going to major in, ag econ. She figured it out for me. It froze up on us.
So, could you hear me that whole time that you went away?
No, I don't think so.
I wonder if it got recorded. I was just saying that we'll call this the technical difficulty that ends the episode.
Yeah.
We will we'll come back next time and we'll talk a little bit more about what it was like studying ag econ at K State. You gave us the perfect hook. We all want to learn more. So so
Oh,
yeah, I think that's a perfect ending, and
yeah.
we'll catch up with you next time.
This was so fun. You
It
made
was
this
fun. I
so
enjoyed
easy
it.
for me. Thank
Oh,
you.
really?
Yeah, you
Well,
did. You did such a good job. Oh,
well, it seemed pretty easy from this side too. So I guess
good.
maybe we both managed to overcome whatever that, whatever that thing was. So
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like next time be like, no, this is gonna be just another fun one like last time. So
yeah,
hopefully the
you did
nerves
great.
will, yeah,
Yeah, you had no reason to be nervous at all. That was
it's
perfect.
all good. It's never as bad as you think it's gonna be. That's
No, no.
a very common lesson that I get. So
I
thank
guess the
you.
whole point of what you're doing is like introducing people to each other in a way, and like kind of getting stories out there that are interesting. And I promise you, your story is really interesting. So
Well,
I'm
thank you.
certain that people are gonna want to dig into that and catch the
Cool.
next catch the next one
Cool.
too.
Yeah, yeah, we'll come back on another one and keep on trucking with the pieces putting themselves together like they
Yeah,
still are. Basically,
that's
that's
right.
still the way it goes. So, yeah, thank you everyone for listening. I appreciate it. I appreciate Will for listening and everybody else who tunes in. Take a second, like the video, leave us a comment down below. What was your favorite part, most surprising, any of that? It's all good. We'll catch you next time. Until then, you take really good care of yourselves, and so will we.
Bye.
Okay, bye.